Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone, I'm Bunga Nadila from English Education Study Program, and in this video I'd like to share my personal reflection on one of the most interesting topics we have studied in our educational psychology class, the cognitive views of learning. This chapter has helped me see learning in a very different light. It emphasized that learning is not just about behavior or repetition, but rather about what happens inside our minds. The cognitive perspective focuses on internal mental processes, how we perceive, remember, understand, and apply information. It sees learners not as passive recipients, but as active thinkers who process and make sense of the information they receive. One of the key ideas that really stood out to me is the information processing theory, which compares our minds to a computer. Just like a computer, we receive input, process it through working memory, and if processed deeply enough, store it in a long-term memory. This model helped me understand why some things I learned stick with me for years, while others vanish within days. It's all about how I process that information. Another important concept is metacognition, which means being aware of how we think and learn. This involves planning how to approach a learning task, monitoring our understanding, and evaluating our performance. When I first learned about metacognition, I had one of those aha moments. I realized that all those time I struggled with studying in the past, it wasn't because I was lazy or incapable, but because I didn't really know how to learn effectively. I wasn't thinking about my thinking. Now, when I study, I ask myself questions like, do I really understand this? Could I explain this to someone else? Or do I need to revisit this topic again tomorrow? These small changes have had a big impact on how I learn. And I can also connect this theory to my own experience as both a student and a teacher in training. Back in high school, I relied heavily on rote memorization, especially for subjects like biology or history. I would cram the night before exam and forget most of it right after. It was exhausting and ineffective, but now that I'm studying to be a teacher, I've come to realize that meaningful learning happens when students are given chance to actively engage with material and connect it to their existing knowledge. During my teaching practicum, I taught English vocabulary to young learners. At first, I tried the textbook method, reading, translating, and repeating, but it didn't really work. The students got bored quickly and they forget the words by the next lesson. So I changed my approach. I started using pictures, games, songs, and even simple role play to help them remember and understand the words in context. The results were amazing. They not only remembered the vocabulary, but were also much more enthusiastic and confident in class. That experience made me believe even more in the importance of constructivist learning, another part of the cognitive view where learners build their own understanding through experiences. Critically speaking, I find the cognitive approach very powerful because it puts the learner at the center. It acknowledges that every student has a unique way of processing information and that learning is not one size fits all. However, I also think there are some challenges in applying this theory, especially in large classrooms with limited time and resources. For example, managing cognitive loads can be difficult. If we give too much information at once, students may feel overwhelmed and disengaged. I've seen this happen when teachers give long explanations without breaks or examples. As a future teacher, I want to be more mindful of this by using chunking techniques, providing visual and allowing time for reflection. I also plan to teach my students about learning strategies and help them develop metacognitive skills. I believe that when students understand how their brain works, they can take more responsibility for their own learning. And if one day I conduct classroom action research, I would love to investigate how cognitive strategies like graphic organizer, retrieval practice, or concept mapping can help improve language learning outcomes. especially in vocabulary and reading comprehension. I'd also be interested in exploring how metacognitive awareness influences student motivation and self-regulation. For example, I might ask, do students who reflect on their learning progress perform better in long-term tasks, or can teaching metacognitive strategies reduce test anxiety in language classroom? In conclusion, learning about the cognitive views of learning has truly changed the way I think about education. I used to believe that teaching was mainly about delivering information clearly, but now I realize that it's much more than that. It's about helping students develop their own ways of thinking, remembering, and understanding. The role of a teacher is not just to give answers, but to guide students in asking the right question, exploring ideas, and reflecting on their learning process. This chapter remind me that learning is deeply personal and that we all bring different backgrounds, prior knowledge, and ways of thinking into the classroom. As future educators, we have a big responsibility to design meaningful learning experiences that respect those differences and support every student growth. I have also come to appreciate how powerful metacognition is, not just for students but also for us as teachers. By being more reflective about how we plan lessons, how we respond to challenges, and how we evaluate our own effectiveness, we can continue growing in our profession. I am especially inspired to apply cognitive learning theories in my future English classes. I want my future students, to feel capable of understanding complex material, not just because I explain it well, but because they have learned how to make sense of it themselves. I believe that when students become aware of how they learn, they become more confident, motivated, and independent. This is the kind of classroom environment I hope to create, one that supports critical thinking, curiosity, and lifelong learning. So I think that's all from me. Thank you for watching. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.